Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a new Pipeline video, the series where we look at industry updates or updates to do with Warframe and have a little banter about them, opening to a forum of discussion in the comments down below and during our Twitch streams, which, incidentally, these are recorded during the Twitch streams. So if you feel like dropping by and having a conversation with us about what we talk about here, then by all means do so. I encourage it, as a good, healthy conversation about updates and new things is always good. DE have recently made a post on their dev workshop saying that they are revisiting the augments. In saying from DE Bear, as we re-look at systems within the game, there is one aspect that we haven't touched in a while, and those are the augments. As new augments and new gameplay systems make their way into the game, the older augments need some attention, and so the team has been assessing what we have and how they can possibly change. It should be noted that some augments tied to abilities that see very little use, such as Pool of Life. However, these will be looked at later and when those abilities are considered for a rework. For now, this workshop only covers augments that we felt we could improve fairly without major overhauls of the base ability as well. They are augments after all. Now, this in turn is just a theory. These are things that are subject to change, so everything that's going to be announced in this looks like it could still change, but the overarching opinion with everything that's happening here is they're trying to bring an update to the augments to make abilities and frames that may have very simple augments or very uninteresting augments be a bit more enticing to use. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to take a quick look at each of these updates and have a little natter about what we think about them. And if you have any of your own opinions about them, please do leave a comment down below, as I would love to get your opinions on how these are changing. And maybe leave a comment on what frames and what augments you think could do with a rework or an update as well. As the way I see this, this is a great thing to come, as a lot of these augments and a lot of these frames haven't had much love in a while, and bringing an update to their augments is going to very much bring these frames into a new light and maybe bring more intrigue into the way they're played. So all's good in my eyes with this. Let's just have a quick look at what these augments actually are and what's changing. The Hysterical Assault augment for Hysteria for Valkyr is receiving an update. The invulnerability will linger for half a second when aiming to prevent getting downed immediately after taking high damage, and they are also increasing the range of this augment. The update to this augment, I feel, is probably a very good one, as the augment itself isn't exactly one of the best on the planet. The Hysterical Assault has, for the most part, been a bit of a gimmick where you are able to just jump to an enemy, and having a prolonged period of immunity frames as well as additional range in terms of your jump is going to definitely benefit Valkyr's ability of covering larger distances and having a bit more survivability. Although in the grand scheme of things, I don't see this changing the actual use of this augment, as it is still just going to be for the gimmick of being able to jump, but at least it's a little bit better now, as it is definitely one of Valkyr's weaker augments. Rising Storm. The Blade Storm augment for Ashe is getting an update in the form of attacks by clones will raise the combo counter, and also will include a passive benefit to extend the combo counter by a duration. This update is definitely going to make a lot more synergy and a lot more longevity to the Rising Storm augment, as it's already going down this sort of avenue anyway. This is just definitely advancing that sort of premise and making it much more appealing to anyone that might want to use the augment in the first place. And that, I feel like that's what we're going to see a lot of a trend with these augments, is it takes the existing premise and then advances it further. Adding the ability to extend a combo counter and to also increase the combo counter now makes it so that you'll get scalability with this augment as well. The Titanic Rumble augment for Atlas is getting an increase to damage and speed, and re-triggering the power will activate the taunt as well as cause a knockdown effect. Not so much a change as it is an advancement on the existing concept. The damage of the Rumbler as well as the health has always been very good, and seeing as when you use this augment you're relying on a singular Rumbler in the first place, having that Rumbler being more optimal is going to definitely make people want to use Atlas's Rumblers a lot more in the future, I feel, and definitely will increase the likelihood that people will use this augment if they are building a high power strength Rumbler build in the first place. Having the ability of re-triggering the taunt as well definitely makes for a pet that almost becomes a tank, more of an actual tank, as opposed to just a rambling Rumbler that goes around whacking things and occasionally being able to soak up some damage here or there. So essentially this synergizes the ability and is now going to allow your Rumbler to actually act more like a tank than it was before. Oberon's Hollowed Eruption Augment is getting a rather nice update, which is going to triple its base duration. This in turn will allow the hollowed ground to have a much longer duration of stored damage. So once you reuse the ability to activate the augment, it will have a much larger base amount of damage that it will then erupt with, basically turning it into a massive nuke ability, more so than it already was. So even though it's increasing the duration, it's going to adversely also increase the damage that it eventually deals. Furious Javelin is getting an update for Excalibur, and it is a flat duration and damage buff, which is amazing because Furious Javelin allows you to benefit your overall melee damage. Excalibur being very heavily melee orientated around his exalted weapon, having this as an augment with any power strength focused build, having the extra damage and the extra duration on this now is going to really push the boundaries of some even larger damage coming from Excalibur. And considering he does so much damage already, I feel like this might be just a little bit unnecessary. They could have done something a little bit more dynamic with this. But, you know, flat damage and flat duration upgrade is nice. You won't have to worry about it quite so much. Hydroid's Tidal Immunity Augment is getting a nice increase to the duration of the immunity buff. So really, this isn't going to do anything dramatically different for Hydroid, and again, being one of Hydroid's least used augments, it can help him play a bit more of a support role as having a longer time of immunity, because as it stands right now, you get 6 seconds worth of status immunity. Tripling that, or at least increasing that to maybe 12, maybe 18 seconds is nice, especially considering it does base itself off duration. So it'll help people who like playing a bit more of a supportive role for Hydroid, getting a bit more potency out of that augment should that be used. Mag's Magnetized Discharge is getting a nice improvement as well, with a passive benefit that will increase the power range of the ability, which is great considering that it will now allow you to potentially disarm many more enemies as opposed to what it does as well. Considering Mag is already based on range, this will definitely make the augment a little bit more useful. Augments also are the bread and butter for Mag to help push her builds further. So making her augment in this regard better is definitely going to make it more likely this will be used. However, I do feel as though there could have been some love to the other augments. It's nice to see Mag getting some attention. Muzzle Flash for Mesa, which up until this point has just been a simple subsidiary crowd control for your muzzle flash. This sort of pushes that a bit further and will help keep up a more consistent crowd control, as the change now allows it for, while shooting gallery is active, you generate a blinding AoE when a threshold is made, which leads me to believe that it's likely that you'll build up a stack. Once that stack is reached with your muzzle flash active, you then get a beneficial additional flash of light to crowd control. So you have one crowd control already. This is adding a second to consistently crowd control as well, which is going to be very interesting, as Mace has not really been known for being a crowd control reliant frame. But if you're planning on playing with a team and you want that additional element of support, this definitely makes it a bit more interesting and a little bit more consistent for what it's trying to do. I'm probably going to get this name wrong, but Explosive Legerdmain. That's a very weird word. You can tell I don't play Mirage, can't you? This is the sleight of hand augment for Mirage, and it is getting an increase to damage and status chance. I personally don't like this augment that much. I barely see it being used, but it's just a flat increase to the damage and status chance, as this ability is used to leave mines behind and traps for enemies to walk in and hopefully die. So more damage, more status chance, it's always going to be good, I suppose, if you do plan on using this augment. And Mirage getting all kinds of love with this update. She's getting another augment update from her Total Eclipse augment, which is getting a flat upgrade to range on the buff to other players. Now, this is going to be great because it's definitely one of her more used augments, as she is used a lot for her buffing potential. So having more range to buff allies a lot more efficiently and easier is going to make life a lot easier for those who do use this augment. Rhino's getting a bit of love with this update as well, with a Piercing Roar update. Now, this is actually probably one of my favorite updates to an augment in this list, as it's taking an augment that's probably the least most used augment for a frame and allowing it to be a little bit, probably a bit more useful, and maybe even become more widely spread in terms of its use as well. So this is getting an update which will allow the Roar to be recast when equipped, which is always nice because as it stands, once you activate it, you have to wait for it to fall off to be recast. So having the ability to recast it, this might be used specifically for that purpose, especially for things like Eidolon runs. You also get an increase to the debuff duration based on equipped mods, and you also generate a stagger effect on enemies that are hit by the Roar's effects. So as it stands, you only get a puncture proc on the enemy when enemies within range. So now this adds an extra element of utility, whilst also then improving its existing efficiency as well. And a little bit of added crowd control, not a bad thing, and this definitely makes it a lot more useful in my eyes. In fact, I might even use this myself now. Contagion Cloud is getting a nice little update as well, allowing the buff to activate when an enemy is killed by damage over time effect, which up until now I never had the ability to, and it's also getting a general increase on range and damage. So this augment is a very useful one, as it allows Saren to put down puddles on the ground and leave clouds in her wake, similar to how Mag's alleged main ability kind of does with the energy orbs and everything. So getting a bit more use out of this and having it become a bit more potent and having a bit more ease of use and a bit more efficiency is going to make it a lot more potent in the grand scheme of things for those who like using this in the first place, and may encourage newer players to give this augment a try as well. Volt is getting an update to his electric shield augment for Transistor Shield. This is going to now make it so that no additional energy drain when a shield is picked up by another player, and it's also getting an increase in the damage conversion percentile. This is just a flat upgrade to the potency of it and should make it a lot more efficient to actually keep it running without running out of energy at the same time. Like, nice little comfort of life update more than anything with this one. Zephyr's Tailwind augment, Target Fixation, is getting an update as well. They are removing the buff after 2 seconds of being on the ground, so you get a little bit more longevity to it lasting. You don't get punished instantly when you land, and a general damage increase per target hit as well. So general damage improvement and comfort of life of not having to be punished right off the bat after hitting the ground, so you have the chance of getting up and letting it stack some more. A very useful buff augment for Zephyr that's not seen very much use in the past, so this may encourage people who may not have used it to give it a try, because it's definitely going to be a bit more useful and a little less annoying to keep running now, which is nice. Now, this is a interesting update. Ember, Frost, Oberon, Saren, and Volt, with their respective augments of Fireball Frenzy, Freeze Force, Smite Infusion, Venom Dose, and Shock Trooper, all of which are buff augments that allow an ability from those individual frames to buff allies with elemental damage or damage of some description, are all being changed so that now when you hold the casting button, it will send out a wave, much like similar abilities that other frames have, giving that elemental buff to the player for every player that touches the said ring. This, in my eyes, is one of the best changes in this list to these frames, because it means these buffs no longer are so nitpicky in terms of being given to those allies. This is something that I think is going to be very useful, and we may very well see this sort of a change being used for other augments in the future, especially ones that are focused around buffing. Well, guys, that's all of those updates to being made to the augments. What do you think of them? I think some of them are very underwhelming. I think that if they're going to bring an update to the augment list, there needs to be a bit more of a push to be different, some gumpture, if you know what I mean. But it's nice to see that they are bringing in updates where the game may have been lacking for a while, as a lot of these have been put onto frames that haven't been touched for a very long time, that have fallen into a element of being stuck in the past. So bringing these frames into the light and into a more modern standard of play is going to be very useful for them. And I feel like we're going to see this happening a lot more frequently with other updates in the near future, as we see older aspects of the game being brought in and made into the more modern systems that are being produced with the game. And as DE Bear thusly stated with this update in the dev workshop, it is a very big focus of the game at the moment to be updating these old systems. And the game definitely needs it, as it's been out for now, what, 5, maybe 6 years now? And seeing these old systems being left behind, it's not going to help if they are left to rot. So seeing these updates is definitely a promising sign. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. I would, again, love to know your comments in the comment section down below. And if you have enjoyed the video, do consider popping a like, maybe subscribe, and maybe even press that join button if you feel like supporting me in what I do. So thank you very much for watching, guys. I will see all you top hatters in the next video. Ta-ra!